Thanks, Rob. Cool. Right, well done for making it back from lunch, especially as this one's the fun part of the day where you get to talk about analytics and numbers. So I'm going to talk today about how to get better conversion using your analytics more intelligently. Everybody's tracking numbers, but I do a lot of conversion optimization work where I go in and the biggest problem is they haven't worked out what they're not getting. So delighted to be talking about numbers because it's what I do for a living, and hopefully you'll enjoy some of this too. Why do we want to know numbers? It's because we're trying to turn user behavior information into value, what pays the bills. Not ego numbers, not we got this to go higher, but money in the bank. We want to try and understand where there are bottlenecks in the key areas of the site that stop that happening. And we want to think through factors that may impact the results of our marketing, of our social, of our paid work. Because we may be reporting on a poor campaign, but actually it might be something in the website that's actually not appealing to the customer, not working that well. The numbers help us find out where. So I want you to think about your data. I'm going to give some examples today of stuff I've worked on, but think about how this would apply to your business. We've got time for questions at the end, specific examples I'm going to work through. And think about what you can investigate. Because there will be bits within the data you've already got and things you can set up to track, which you can add to, which will help understand how things are working or not. So I'm going to give you some examples and some ideas, and hopefully will inspire you to have a little experiment yourself, to try and play with the numbers you've got, look at what you could set up, look at what you start tracking, and think about how you could crunch those, how you could collect data, which would help you do that. So when I'm talking about collecting data, I'm really talking about Google Analytics, and when I talk about Google Analytics, for the most part nowadays, I'm recommending that we talk about Tag Manager. So quick show of hands, you can kind of see the audience. Anybody using Tag Manager at the moment actively? That's a good percentage. Cool. So for you guys, this next bit's probably not going to be much use, but for those who haven't used it, I'm going to encourage you to try and use it more. Tag Manager basically allows you to put tags into page, which makes all this stuff I'm going to talk about much easier. So you get a tag, and within that tag you can add events, custom scripts, HTML, and you can set these off on custom triggers. They fire when you want them to fire. And you can add extra dimensions, extra metrics, extra detail to what's happening on the website. So you're not just tracking page views, you're tracking the shape of those page views, you're tracking the information about the person who has experienced that page view, that event, that hit. And you can do that by collecting variables. So what we've got here is a big old list of user-defined variables, and these are pulling from various different sources from the page, and we use those variables, the things we pull into Tag Manager, to then push out to fill up fields in Google Analytics. And Google Analytics has got lots of little slots to put data into, but when you just put that first line of code in the page, it only fills about 10% of what you could do with it. So what sort of thing do we want to put in that slot? That's the question we often get asked. So here's an example. Here we've got a used bike site, and we've got make, model, engine size, mileage, colour, year of registration. And this is all information I want to capture. This is all stuff that may be pertinent to things I'm targeting, things I want to report against. So with Tag Manager, we can pull this by reading from the DOM on the page. So we can actually pull that out of the page, just looking at the divs, looking at the sections of the HTML, or we can push it into Tag Manager through data layer from the system. So directly into the system, it doesn't even have to be shown on page, it can just be data that's thrown to the engine. So we went send to data layer. When something happens, we push the values that we want, and we've got a data layer state that is current to that moment, which has those values filled in. They are then available to be used. Now they can just sit there in data layer, they last for the session, or in fact just for that page, and they're gone, they're wiped, next state, next page, we get a new set. Or at that point we can capture them, say to Google Analytics, record this now, I want to use this later. So you're collecting data in Tag Manager variables, putting them into a container, a stasis, a place where you hold them, and then you choose to use them. And we can also capture those without a data layer. So there's certain stuff which is automatically populated from Google. They've got click listeners, they've got form click listeners. So you don't have to manually construct something that's beyond there. If you're on WordPress, there's a good plugin from Duracell Tomy, which out of the box ticks some options, will collect an awful lot of the data about how people are interacting with the website. It allows you to put e-commerce data on there for a start. So this all gives us numbers to work with. This all gives us some stuff to put into Google. into the Tag Manager section, and that then allows us to make event variables. So here's a Google Analytics event tag. So this is the same as if you're putting it onto the script on the page. But in this case, I don't know how clear this is, we've actually got a category lookup and dealer names. So what we've got here is variables, the things you're collecting from the page, can actually be variable. So in this case, we've got a lookup to the page type. So my category, my event category that's going to report into Google Analytics is not defined at this stage. It's going to look up into a table to see which one should be recorded at this point. And the same is being used for both the action, the label, and the value. In this case, we've got new and used bikes on this website. A used bike price will be different to a new bike price because a used bike price will be fixed, whereas a new bike price will be configured. You may add panniers, you may add heated grips. So there is no one fixed price. So what we want to do is capture price first seen and price actually actioned when the event happened. In this case, it's a used bike click. So they've viewed, or used bike view, so when they view the page, what price is showing. So here is a lookup table, and in this case, we've got bike stop type. Again, not sure how clear this is, but I will tweet it out afterwards as a deck. So our first lookup candidate, the thing we're looking at is bike stop type, new or used. And then depending what we're doing with that, we're pulling in a different version of the label, different amount of detail. So all those variables are collected in the big stack. Some of them are new bike variables and some of them are used bike variables. They're different because obviously on a new bike, mileage is 0. On a used bike, we'll have mileage. We'll also have the date we bought it into stock when we started advertising it. We'll have a stock ID that's different for new bike stock, which may be at central manufacturer, and used bike stock will be on our main system. I only want to run one event tag. So I'm running one tag, and then depending on the page, it cascades down and applies the rules. So it's data appropriate to what I'm measuring. Not visible on the first one, but you can actually see at the bottom here, we've also got some custom dimensions, which is basically an empty hole that's yet to be defined. So it's a hole that Google's given to you for your own purpose. It's not defined to use for anything, but we can add extra detail, extra dimensions, extra information about what data we're collecting for anything, page view hit, any event that we're pushing through. So before I go too far into it, I'm going to talk about some of the tools and stacks which we're going to see used in the examples later on, which is kind of how we can make some value out of these numbers. Collecting is one part, using is the other. So we started off by talking about Google Analytics and Tag Manager. Once you've got the data into Google Analytics, you can use the UI, but typically if you want to do some sums with it, you'll pull it across to Google Sheets, and you can do that with the API that's built into Google Sheets now, or you can use a tool like Supermetrics. It's a paid tool, but at the free end, it's fairly useful. At the top end, you can automate things and schedule things. You can also pull the data through to BigQuery and through directly into Data Studio, or go via BigQuery or Sheets into Data Studio to present it. So for a starter stack, that's basically free unless you pay for Supermetrics for the advanced version. I tend to use Analytics Edge, using stuff that pulls stuff down to desktop through the API. That's one of several tools that's out there. The main advantages to using a desktop tool is I tend to be crunching bigger numbers, and unless I'm doing something in BigQuery that's kind of already got a built-in mechanism, I'm normally doing some number crunching that's a little bit more specific to the case in hand. So I'm building it offline, modeling it, and then putting it somewhere else. That makes it easier. Lets me get around the sampling, pull down data bit at a time, and I can stitch inquiries together. So I can have the first 7 dimensions that I want to track, and then pull another 7 down, and then mash them together to actually get a bigger set. Another tool that's very similar is Next Analytics. This one plugs into Excel as well, but it also has a standalone. So you can actually run this on the Mac or on a desktop without actually having Excel installed, and that will output to CSV, it will output to SQL, it will send it to a database, and you can set that to run on a batch schedule or indeed save to the cloud, which if you're using tools like Tableau and Power BI, putting the data, the big data set into the cloud means you can access it from something else. If you're talking about business data, trying to combine web data with your business data, how you make money, then you're typically getting data from SQL Server or something similar to SQL Server. And again, you can process that in Excel and Power BI, and it allows for deeper visualization. You can do more calculations, you can use more statistical analysis. So if you get to the stage where you have to do the actual percentages and work out the standard deviation and what your distributions are, having a tool that does that natively is a little bit easier. Again, that's why I tend to bring it back to desktop myself. But those sort of things are also possible in the web with things like Shiny and R. And for the most part, Power BI, if you're doing a simple pull from your data, that's also got the same tool. So if you just want to pull Power BI data or Google Analytics data straight into Power BI, it's got a plugin for that. It's got a plugin for Adobe Analytics. It'll pull from Amazon Redshift. So the ability to get data into the thing is built in. what you do with it comes quite down to what you need for the business. Power Query and Power BI also have an API tool within them, which means that anything that's got a REST API that you can call on, you can code to, you can pull the data from. So if you're using tools like SEMrush, Majestic, something that's got an API to it, if they haven't already got a built-in connector, you can basically query it, follow the instructions, and pull down lots of data in one big lump. And this one also has, if you haven't got handy data, CSV processing. So if you take your weekly CSV email that's been exported from whatever system, or just pulling data down from the Google Analytics UI, you can drop them all in one folder, and it will basically add each CSV as you add it into your data set. So it effectively works as one big flat table, even if it may be 15, 20, 30,000 files. So this is a bit more work than if you were just to put it into Google Sheets and take the numbers as they're given to you. It's a bit more work than if you were to pull it down into Excel and do a VLOOKUP to see if you can match against brand. But if you build a data model like this, and again, this is Power BI, but Tableau uses something similar, then it's a much more powerful, much more flexible, because this example data model allows me to split out the various pieces. So whereas if you were pulling down from Google's e-commerce report, you could look at the product report, or you could look at the overall roll-up, but you can't look at the two together, because you've got multiple rows of products, more than one item in each transaction, plus you've got your transaction total. So product revenue and your total revenue are different numbers according to Google. But if you're linking these up using the transaction ID, you can have your total, but then you can drill down to see which products were contained within that, which allows you to do further analysis on how the basket is shaped and what's in that basket. So it lets you combine and calculate and filter and consider the things which make up that total, because we're trying to work out how to do more of the good stuff. But if you don't understand how you get what you've currently got, you're going to struggle with that. If you've got a bit more time, if you've got devs and friendly data analysts on board, happy you. I generally don't get to work with that, but there are bigger toys out there. RStudio, which is the free option, Tableau, which is pretty pricey but good, and then you've got Microsoft SQL Server Service, Integration Services, which is the online version, and Power BI, which links to the online version of that. So these tend to work better for bigger data sets. It's not the sort of stuff you're going to jump into feet first as your first option, because most small, medium sites, there's no need. Even on some big sites, if you're looking at a subset, there's no need. You've got the tools to hand already. But if you get to the bigger end of the market in terms of volume, not quality, and I'm not saying big data because it's not, then these can do some good stuff. And Power BI particularly is very useful because it's got online query language. Who saw the news this week that Google Analytics is going to have like a real-world querying, so you can type in, what's my best sales this quarter? Can we see that? Well, coming soon to the main interface for Google Analytics, but this has been in Power BI for the last couple of years since they launched. So when you load this to their machine learning, you can start to ask questions, or the business owners can start to ask questions from their dashboards. So if you create them a dashboard for the information they're interested in, you stop getting questions about, show me where that report is, how do I get to channels? They can literally type in a box and go, what's my best performing organic page? We're not quite there with Google yet, but that's the ability you get when you start to pull down data sets and structure it in that way. Why is that interesting? Well, it becomes useful when you start querying that data in ways that you can affect with the business. So this is an example of an ArcGIS map. So we've got GeoLookup from Google, simple as it can be. It's not as accurate as it can be, but it gives us some data, and we're matching that against customer addresses. So we've got customer addresses in our business data CRM. We know where our purchases and our inquiries have got, their postcode, their address, and we can match the locations for that to the general area that we're pulling up from Google, which allows us to look at this and get a heat map of where we've got buyers and where we've had buyers previously and what types of car, bike, whatever, have been in there. And this isn't clicking. And we can then drill down. So each of those spots, we can click on them, drill down and see that subset. So if we're talking about somebody who's got a bunch of dealerships and we're doing a leaflet drop, say in the Surrey area, we can drill down and see what the overall uptake has been on a particular type of car that's contained within our leaflet drop, or contained within our social media for that area, and how that's converted against our current database, people who match, which Sam, if anybody was in with Sam's session earlier on, match against the current group, and we can see how successful that's been in terms of our visits to site, views of that type of stock, clicks on that stock, inquiries, and because we're going to match the inquiry ID, we'll actually be able to look this up later on and see how many people came for a test drive and how many of those resulted in sales. So we've got a top-to-tail version of the entire journey from web through to offline business, but we're mapping this with the two pieces of data put together. So the other thing to look at, and this really didn't come out well on the colour, averages. We talk about, here's my average conversion rate, here's my average bounce rate. Both not very good metrics because average masks a lot of information. In Tableau, R, Power BI, the statistical tools, you can actually start to map distributions. It's a simple histogram in this respect, but what you can't see here is we've got some smaller bars and some really big bars. The colour hasn't come out on that at all. So if I was to say what's my most popular model, my best average overall, I'm not going to get much information on that. But if I can subdivide that down by Audis, Land Rovers, Bentleys, my average conversion rate is then appropriate to the amount of stock I've actually got of that. So you may be doing something that's optimizing for the one you've just got the most noise for. It works for the people you can get in cheaply, your most voluminous, the most large number of people, but maybe you're least loyal, the guys you have to fight for hardest, because they're the ones who show on the overall average, because they're the ones who have the largest numbers to affect that. But it may be the worst for your big spenders. The people who end up being the people who spend lots of money, return good profit on the margins that you've got. We don't sell many Bentleys, and again, you can't see the text, but the smallest one at the top here is Bentleys. But a £250,000 Bentley has got a lot more margin in it than a £20,000 Audi. We want to be able to look after those and separate those out and maybe market them differently. But if it all comes into the average of the Google product list, then they're going to show always at the bottom. And even if you put a weighted sort on in terms of conversion rate, they're not going to show in terms of what matters to us, which is how many people came in the door, bought one of these, and how many upsells did they buy. So often, when you're reporting against this was our biggest success, it's not a business win. What you've reported is a web win, not a business win. So all of this process about collecting extra data is to really facilitate the ability to be able to drill down and understand how you make money from the web, how you make business from the web, rather than just how you make web numbers go up. Even if you've got a campaign win or a test win. Some other tools which really help with this, especially if you're not particularly statistically minded, can't see these patterns in the data, is using measurement user session tools. Watch people doing stuff. Go to ClickTail, Hotjar, the rest of these up here. I've got no particular preference for the platform. It tends to be whatever the customer's using. But these allow you to watch people doing particular journeys, seeing people who've come in from a particular channel or campaign, where they go, what they do. Being able to see whether somebody who comes in, lands on a Bentley page from a particular source, is more or less hesitant. You may find that people who come in for a lower priced Audi are much more interested in looking at the pictures, seeing what specs are in there, whereas the Bentley guy is straight away looking for the button because they're going to come and do that stuff with the guy because they want a more personal service. So you're not talking to the same audience, even though they are both ultimately looking at cars, they are looking and researching a different way, the different sensitivities to what's going to drive them. Again, that may be a level too high, but simpler option, talk to them. I know it's controversial, but actually speak to the customers. Ask them how they use the website. If you can do user testing, there's some cheap and free tools out there, get them to go through the process. Find people who fit the profile you're trying to attract and watch what they do. So, if you want to be brave, get yourself BCC'd on the customer service emails. You want to see what's not working on your website, find out what's causing problems, where people are getting stuck. Get blind copied on those emails and see the complaints come in. And it will be much more complaints than thank yous. But it gives you an understanding of what you can't see in the numbers. Why were people rage quitting at this particular set? If you can understand that, and you can then look back at the data and go, oh yeah, I can see that. And it may be it's too small a blip to see on the overall, but if you've looked at an area where somebody's talking to you about it and telling you about, I didn't get on with this part of the site, you've got something you can investigate within the data. Reason to drill down. Jump on a live chat. Or even just read the feedback forms if you get those coming through. If you're really brave and you really want to get into the weeds on this, you can also look at hit level data. Using the measurement protocol now, you can send that data not just automatically to Google, but you can actually use that to send it off measurement protocol to a server and record that where you want to. Collect as much data as you want, sampled or not sampled. There are tools which help you with that. This one's Citylana, which if you read it backwards says analytics. It's been on beta for about a year and a half, and it's been fairly useful. They've just put their pro versions out, which are a little bit spendy, should we say. But the free option is good to try out, and they give you a free Excel template and a free Power BI template just to try out. And Power BI is a free download for the basic version. Excel, most of you will have it installed. If you don't, then unlucky. The caveat to that is that the Power BI tends to work on Windows only, so if you're on a Mac, you'll have to use the Parallels version. But Power BI in the cloud, system agnostic. So we've talked about tools we can use, the general idea of why we want data. Let's look at some of the metrics we can do and how we could use that. Some examples of ones which I've done in the past which have helped customers make more money. So we're talking about why we track stuff. We're looking for success events, things that have happened, good things that have happened, and things we want to track. Track that good thing. They clicked, they bought, they added, they went to checkout. These are most typical things we track. But I will normally go in, and if somebody is tracking that, they won't be tracking it to the level of detail that I want or recommending today, because I want to track the type of thing, and then I want to track within that the specific area within that thing, and then the detail. So if the type of thing is used inquiry, and then the type of thing is used motorcycle, used car, used van, and then within that, specific model, stock ID, mileage, etc., as you saw me collecting earlier on. Why do we want to collect that much detail? Because we're going to use it. So at the moment, this is a report in Google Analytics, inquiry click on a used vehicle, R3, engine size 320cc, 2015, 6 images, and then the bit that's blurred out is the date it was added into stock. So within the UI, I've got that. So within the UI, I can do a custom segment to say, how are my 2015 bikes working? Which previously, if I wasn't collecting that in the label, if I just left, added to cart or clicked inquiry, bike, all I'd know is bikes are going well, but all we do is bikes, so that's not much help. By drilling down to this level, I can actually subdivide even how R3s of 2014 versus 2015 do against each other, and if I'm advertising stock of that, if I've got my paid campaigns going for that, I can see how they work for older or newer models. You can use it for remarketing, because if I've got somebody who's clicked on this and not completed, so they've clicked on the button but not completed the form that follows, they can go into a remarketing pot that maybe shows them R3s or tracers, or things that fall within that same age or that price group. So my marketing becomes more intelligent because the stuff they've shown an interest in, whether it be a page view, a click, or taking them off the database if they've finally inquired, I can do at a very specific model level. Event goals, we're going to talk about a bit later on, so I won't go into detail here. And then filters, offline analysis. So you may want to put these into versions of your website where you're looking at how well we do for 18 to 24-year-olds, and you're filtering out or using segment to do anti-filter to only show the stuff they're able to ride. Because whilst you may like the fact that they're coming in to look at the Rossi Replica R1, until they've passed their test, till they're old enough to pass their test, they're no use to us because they're tyre kicking. We want the people who are actually actively looking at bikes they're able to buy. Again, it's an example for this particular use case, but that's what we need to do. We need to think through what's the scenario. Why have we got lots of people who Google reckons are 18 to 24 looking at bikes they're not actually legally able to ride yet? Can we use that? Is it worth advertising to them? We need to be a bit careful because when you get to this level of detail, each one's very individual. You're very unlikely to get duplicates because we've got a unique stock ID in here and a unique date. So if you've got a lot of traffic, you'll get something called high cardinality. You'll bundle these all up into, here's your top 10 and then other, which will be a big pot. But when you drill down, when you segment down to have less of those results, you'll start losing the other, or the other pot will get other pot will get smaller. And when you pull out through the API row at a time, you'll get that detail. So there's no real harm in it. It just may find that some reports, some aggregated reports, are a bit less useful because it's bundled a bunch together. Fail events. So we talked about success events. Happy cheerleader. Why do I want to track fail events? Why do I want to track things that didn't work? Well, here's an e-commerce example. Here we've got, sorry, not in stock, please change the amount. Basically, they wanted to buy, tough luck. It's not a very good message, not very good UX. It's a common issue for e-commerce, anything with appointments, any lead gen sites where there's a limited availability, where you kind of go, I'd like to book an appointment next Thursday, tough shit. It's not going to help. Main problem we get there is your conversion rate, so what you're reporting against your paid campaign, what you're reporting against your value of your organic, your ROI from organic, is affected by something that's not actually caused by your marketing. It's caused by the business process. So your conversion rate is actually artificially depressed by the fact that you don't have stock to sell. You can't push that stuff out. You probably want to know about these because you probably want to stop that advert till you have got stock to sell, save some budget. Or find an alternative if you're going to be out of stock for a while. But so many people don't track this. They'll just track success only and will never track when something goes wrong. So in this case, again, using the data layer, but you can track this from just pulling from the page when you see the error message. We're pulling through a fail event. If it failed, did it fail or not? And then what type of failure, where it came from. Was this a out of stock message? Was this a wrong colour message? Was it you are a numpty, you haven't picked the 3 things I needed to pick before you press the button failure? Do we need a UX issue fixing? And where it failed. Because again, I don't just want to know total number of people who had a problem. I want to know if it's specific to an area. I want to know it's specific to a category, particular product line we've got a problem with, particular part of the site, or a template where we're getting more conversions, more conversion problems, where we get more issues where the UX is not helping people understand that they need to pick, width and length of a shoe rather than just picking a colour, as we would do for a t-shirt. So you may find that your e-commerce store performs differently depending on what you're selling. T-shirts, one size fits all. Shoes have got a width fitment, extra requirement for the customer. They may not spot that. So your shoe's not converting as well, maybe because your drop down or your way you select the width of the shoe is not well communicated. But that's not a site-wide problem, but fixing it to bring up one of your higher value areas. So in this example, and this is why we're tracking it, and again, they might not be able to see this too clearly, but we're actually looking add to cart, but we're tracking product. So you can see which part of the site we're losing it in, category and search results. So we can see where it's most serious. And we can see exceeds available stock. So they asked for 10, we only had 5. But we've also got one that says out of stock. Doesn't matter how many they asked for, we've got none left. Because those are 2 different errors, 2 different problems to fix within the business. And if we clicked on that to drill down, we'd actually get to the label, which will show us which products have got that particular scenario. And you can see here the difference it makes. We're running out of stock on some key lines, new stock arrives, that's how many errors we're getting. Which we can track, we can filter in or out of our reporting, and we can keep that in mind. And if we're drilling down to see which product we're out of stock of, we end up with a list to show which ones we should try and restock faster, which ones we should take off our PPC list or put on pause for a while. So it's something we can take action on that's probably more reactive, more able to take action on than our success event, because that prevents us losing some money. We can do that immediately. So I talked earlier on about event goals. And event goals are basically just goals, same as anything in Google Analytics. But goals are quite often only ever set up on /thank you sales success. And that doesn't really give you much detail. It just says they made it to a page. And there's caveats within that, once per session per user, only if it's the exact version, and you've got to map it correctly. I prefer event goals for the actual endpoint. You can't use events as the steps. They can only be URL. But event goals for the endpoint because you get more detail. So whether it's a click, ad, viewed video, whatever, event goals give you more than just they got here. They tell you what type of here and what type of product and what extras you can drill into it. So I actually like these because they allow you to segment your goals out from one big lump of did something into did lots of things that add up to the total. And I'm talking about goals here, but quite often I go into a site and they may be set up the e-commerce tracking, but they won't have a single goal set up, whether it's destination or event. So if you're doing that, you've got a lot more things to add to your game before you can move on to some of this. Don't be that guy. So, example of why I'd need to split a goal out. Here we've got a race client, like Tough Mudder, Muddy Race, Mentalists, 26 miles of killing yourself through mud in the cold. Very popular. And we've got join, create team, any ticket type on click to book. And then we're looking at Saturday or Sunday. So we're looking at any day. That's our main goal. They click to book to buy, go to Eventbrite. So we're counting how many people we send to Eventbrite total, roll up total. I've also set up a goal for Saturday, which is exactly the same setup, but don't care which ticket type, booking Saturday. So it's my Saturday only clicks to Eventbrite. And then, as you can probably guess, I've got the Sunday only. But that gives me 3 goals within my goals, 20 set per view, which allows me to look at the difference that makes up my total. Those eagle-eyed people will spot up, those don't too add up. That's because we had a problem on this one. But this is why you set it up on Sandbox first to test, and once you're happy with the numbers, then you put it to your live account. We can break down the way it's reached. We can spot which one's the laggard between it. We can think, we might probably need to incentivize Sunday because we've got close to capacity on this one. People aren't clicking. And bear in mind, this is the click at the moment. They haven't bought, they've just gone through to Eventbrite. But Eventbrite only tells us what's sold. So we need to know how many bodies have gone through for each one. And in this case, we can find out that Sunday sold less on Eventbrite because fewer people clicked to get there in the first place. That's useful to know. So we can compare our click totals. But we can do the same thing for our buy goals. So the people who did complete on Eventbrite, we're able to break that down. And if we've got the number of people who clicked versus the number of people who bought, we can also work out our buy to click ratio, which allows us to see that Sunday's not only a laggard in terms of volume, it's a laggard in terms of being able to convert. We can do something about that. we can actually ask Eventbrite, why is this one not so easy to use? Because the Saturday one's defaulted to. You may have clicked the Sunday button, but you go through and it defaults to Sunday because Eventbrite's retarded. We were able to fix that. Custom dimensions. I talked about it earlier on. So we looked earlier on about kind of, here's the overall path. Selection of stuff you can collect, and custom dimensions really aren't limited too much beyond kind of, it needs to be a text field that you're sending through to them. So in e-commerce, you'll be talking a product SKU. I talked earlier about stock ID, site ID, visitor ID, so you want to put your cookie values into it. Anything that will allow you to know more about, or filter by, or pivot by, or drill into later on, that is useful to your business to know. You've got 20 on a standard account, and bearing in mind that's 20 holes to put them into. You could have 4 million things that go into that, like client IDs, but the actual slots, that's quite a lot to work with, and certainly if you're not using them, add something to there. With the paid account, with 360, you've got up to 200, so there's quite a lot to play with, and that's quite good fun. Why do we want custom dimensions? Again, using this within the UI is probably the simplest way to explain it, but I've got dealer ID down here. I've got part exchange, so we saw earlier on about splitting out your actions. I wasn't just inquiry click, I was also able to drill down to say, what type of click? Was it a part exchange? Was it a finance inquiry? Was it a test ride inquiry? Because not all clicks are equal, not all inquiry completes are equal. I've got the dealer ID because once somebody's gone to book for a test ride, or we sent something through to the customer's email address, to dealer, in this case, email address, we want to see what happened. And if I've got the network CRM system, the dealer ID links back to that particular dealer and the account, the inquiries that he's got in from that system. So whilst the dealer may only care about what lands in his inbox and what test rides he needs to book, we care about what happens across the whole network. Everybody at Yamaha or Kawasaki or whichever brand it is. And we want to see how each one of those does on converting. The leads we send them from the national advertising and from the national SEO efforts, when it lands in their inbox and they go, couldn't be bothered to book it. We want to know those guys, because that's what makes the difference in the business. If we're sending a ton of leads through and they can't be bothered to answer their email, they prefer it by fax. Genuine story, one of the guys actually wants his emails coming in by fax because he prefers that method. We have got a special little bit which takes all the online CRM stuff and faxes this muppet because it's still not 1990. Sorry, we're videoing this, aren't we? That didn't. Yeah. But also want the dealer ID because the dealer name varies. These are multi-franchise dealers for the most part, and we're sending this information or collecting this information from multiple different networks. So we don't want to be in a situation where Jim Bob Kawasaki is also, Manchester Yamaha or something. They'll have a different dealer name depending on which network they're in. If we're looking at dealer name only, some of the websites are on subdomains, some aren't. Dealer ID is a single unique identifier that allows us to link this all back to the network CRM and to our reporting. So we can do our whole network performance, how everybody does on Yamaha R3s across the network. We can compare them and we can see how they do on their own. So it's just a little thing, again, a use case that's particularly specific to this case, but it may be something which you may be able to think along the same lines of using a custom dimension. Custom metrics. So if dimensions describe the data, metrics measure it. Seems logical. These are the ones which are probably used half as much as custom dimensions, and custom dimensions aren't used that much at all. Again, some examples, your mileage may vary depending on what you need, but lead value, if we know how much that inquiry is worth, if it's a £3,000 motorcycle and we know that our network average is 10% of those convert to sale, 10% of that is profit, we can actually put a number into the system, push into the data layer saying current running data value for a lead capture is this much. And we can compare that against our cost of acquisition and see how much is working. Not just an arbitrary event equals 10 value that we've typed in, pulled live from our current system, working against the network average or that dealer's average, pushed into the system so we can actually score it and see how we're doing for that particular type of lead. So when people talk about average cost per acquisition, I'm talking about average at a level that I'm targeting at, not an average for the overall. Custom metrics. This is probably a more simple, more common example. When you're tracking on e-commerce, it'll track the original price, which again, we can't really see here, but $3.99. So normally when you've got it set up, it will be picking up the field that says price. And that field will say price to the system, whether it's crossed out or not, whether there's an offer on or not. So if you track add to cart, so you track value of basket, they're going to vary. More money will be added to cart than meets basket, because basket is reading the value that is, and your add to cart is reading the value of currently shown. But we want both values, don't we? Because we want to know what our price before and after is. It may be you're only collecting this value. You've got it set up to current price is where you read your data from for e-commerce. But that means you don't know what it was. So we end up with, every time we have a sale, our average value shakes more and more. Our difference between what's lost in basket, the ad process, differs more than it actually is. It adds more volatility just because of the way we set our tracking up. Custom metrics allow us to track both. We can track both those values, but we push one through as original price and one through as discount price. So we can record and then we can later calculate the differences. That means our reports can then show you what you've actually spent in discounts, what your discounting process, what your difference between what the RRP is and what you're showing has cost you. Calculated metrics follow straight on from what we were talking about. Again, I would typically call these business metrics, not web metrics. These aren't the sort of things that Google's going to record, but the sort of thing you want to do from Google's data, from what you've collected and pushed into Google. So we've got that example just there. The original price minus discounted price equals value lost. And you can actually create that as a metric, which will then be available to use in reports. So you can actually have a value lost by product ID and see how much you've discounted on stuff, or watch how that changes over time as your sales go in. How much did that sale promotion actually cost you? We had our example earlier on where I manually worked out what the drop-off rate was between Exeter Saturday and Sunday. We can create that as a metric, which means we can then put this into a report. We can see that for AdWords bottom funnel, 28% drop-off, or click-to-buy ratio. And we can then do that with everything else we've already got within Google Analytics. So by creating a calculated metric, whether it's from existing metrics or from ones you've built, allows you to put a new one in place that gives you something that probably makes more sense to what you care about as a business. And then you can apply all your filters, your segments, your demographics. Custom reports, I've briefly shown that. And I don't use them as much as I used to because there are new toys available. But within the limits of the user interface, if you aren't building custom reports to look at the specific parts of the data that you care about and can take action about, you're missing a trick. Because of the standard general reports, they're all decent enough. And if you drill into a certain level that you've got and you apply certain filters that you want, that's fine. But when you get to that stage, you can actually click the Customize button and say, build me a custom report based off what I just made in the main report. If you want to start from that level, and it'll build you one. So here we've got a custom report, and earlier on I said we had my goal that I set up, the goal example where I said I didn't care whether it's an individual create team or manage a team, click. I still collected that data, and in the event report, I've still got that. So I can see what percentage of traffic that's clicking is an individual, how many want to join a team, how many want to create a team. Now this probably makes sense. There's going to be a lot more individuals, and there's going to be a lot less people creating a team. But that doesn't tell the whole story, because again, think about what the business needs from this data. Somebody creates a team, typically they'll have between 15 and 20 mates come along with them. They'll have sponsorship, they'll have charity involvement, they'll have extra coverage, they may be blogging it. We want to talk to those people more than we want to talk to these people. So we're able to count which campaigns, which pages drive more of the create team ones. We can also track and find out over time that create team tends to happen in this big peak here when we announce the next event. Big surge in people creating a team, which is then followed a couple of weeks later by the team captains nagging people, big surge in join team, which we generally don't have to pay for because they're doing it themselves. But the individuals are kind of a background noise all the way along here because they can book right the way up until the day before the event. Nobody's going to start a team of 15 people the day before they're going to go do it. So what do we do with that? When we market, we phase our marketing depending on what we're doing. We know how well we're doing on create team versus individual at different points. We know if we're behind the schedule. If the bulk of the body's turning up to a race event, I've done in the first 3-week push, create a team, you liked it last time, bring 5 mates next time, and we fall behind on that, we've got to make a shit ton more work out of the individuals to claw it back towards the end. So it's just data from the event, but all this is from the click event and then ultimately the buy events from these that allows us to go. That worked for creating team, that creative worked. This particular campaign, we're lagging behind. The emails we sent out this time last year, 3 times as many emails sent out on the create team message last year than we did this year, and we're behind on create teams. We need to book our ideas up. So that's what we can do. In this case, custom reports. Drill down again, and we've got Exeter Saturday, Exeter Sunday, 2016. We can see how the 2 days are doing against individual. So we can see not just that we're lagging behind on individual, but which day. So when we start going through, we can segment our database and go on. Here's the Sunday runners last time. Here's the guys who bought. Let's hit the other guys with, why haven't you booked for Sunday this year? Because that's the laggard, we've already seen that. That's one we can bring up. Compare the performance year on year. Is it one type of ticket we're falling behind on? Is it a particular day? Is it a particular venue? Exeter's one of 3 that we run. Are sales genuinely behind schedule? Because we may see a lower number. Or actually, are we getting as much traffic through, but our buy-to-click ratio has dropped off compared to last year? Because we're now measuring that, aren't we? And in this case, the problem we had with 2017 from 2016 was that Eventbrite changed its UI and their click-to-buy ratio dropped off a cliff because it's great on mobile, except it wasn't. You may have seen these little bubbles. Anybody using these annotations? Show of hands. Good. If you aren't, do. Record changes to tracking. So when you change stuff, when you add in new metrics, when you start measuring things, when you break a goal that was probably previously one big goal into 3, put a note in there, because you'll remember it now, but in a year's time when you start doing your year-on-year comparisons, you'll be like, why has that gone down by 30%? Oh yeah, because we took out something because we're no longer counting it. Our previous years, we were counting that manage team button, people coming in to actually make sure their mates are signed up, in our total goals, because they're all clicking the same button to go to Eventbrite. The following year, we took out 20% of that lump. So it would have shown that our year-on-years had dropped by 20%, but actually what we've done was stopped false reporting. Note goes in system. Bear that in mind. We can record campaign and promotion periods. So if we suddenly see our individuals who are lagging on a Sunday ramp up and Sunday tickets go crazy, we want to remind ourselves the effort we made to do that. And you can highlight odd data, peaks and spikes. This gap here, brand new CTO came in and went, I'm moving the whole site across to Wix and didn't bother putting a Google Analytics tag on. Or migrating it on SEO. That's why that number is a lot lower than that number. There's no accounting for stupidity. So, we've got lots of data. In fact, I think this is actually law, but we're going to pull data from the API. If we collected this information, we can do stuff with it. We're going to match it against business data, whether we do this within the UI or not. We want to automate it, and we want to crunch those segments, and then we want to take action. So I'll be doing stuff like this, and I'll be filtering down by weekend, weekday, trying to find that sort of information as to which one works. The customer really wants to care about what's working. Here we've got a test where this one's clearly the winner, but you wouldn't have spotted that from that slide so easily. And we can do things like time of day, heat maps, etc. Now all of this is just using Excel. You can do this via the CSV export, so you can export time of day from Google Analytics UI, download days, mash the two together. You can do something like that with a pivot table. It's a damn sight easier if you automate it, because basically when you hit the refresh button, you'll have all the latest data come through, and because you've broken it into filters, at the moment I've got these 3 here, but I've got my custom dimension, collection and delivery for particular products. I can find out when people are more likely to ask for collect in store now, pick up same day and pay a premium for that, or whether they're going to go for delivery and get the free delivery. And then present it with Google Data Studio, so we can push this across. Those calculated metrics we saw earlier on, if you haven't done them, you can do versions of that within Google Data Studio, which is helpful. Custom filters, so again, we previously pulled out equals Exeter Saturday and Sunday. If we hadn't created that goal, we could look for events that include Saturday, exclude Sunday, and create our version of this retrospectively if we hadn't. And it's got links directly to Google Analytics, AdWords, all the Google tools at the moment. So it's a good out-of-the-box option. And you can get customer interface versions of this. So when it automatically refreshes, which it will do on a daily basis, unless you're pushing through sooner, and you can do custom filters. So this customer, or in this case the people who run the websites for them, can filter down by that dealer ID. I've blanked all these out because proprietary information. But they can look at their whole setup for every single one of the dealers in that group. They can look at the date range, or they could look at one particular dealer over a particular date range. But one interface, same set of data. I built this once, don't have to touch it again, self-service, frees me up to do other stuff. And 20 pages per report, pretty much unlimited reports, and it's free at data entry level unless you're paying for BigQuery. You've got something like Tableau. Really, again, I said this is big data sets. Here, you can't see it so clearly, but that actually says 3 years. So this is actually looking back over 3 years worth of data. And all we've got is Land Rover versus the rest of them. But where we were pulling out the specific details on the bike stuff in the event label, you're a bit limited on how much you can fit in that field. Here, we pulled out stock ID, and that's it. And offline, I'm matching stock ID against what we know about that stock. So here we've got engine size, CC, trim, what extras it's got. And therefore, we're able to look at the conversion rate and see whether an Audi A3 with leather trim and a sat-nav converts better than an Audi A3 with standard trim without the sat-nav. Because if it does, we'll buy more with the leather trim. Or if it doesn't, or they're about the same, but this one costs us £1,000 more to buy it at auction, we won't buy the more expensive one at auction because we'll get the same revenue buying cheaper cars. Again, summarise for the customer, that's really faded, but this is Power BI doing the simpler version of exactly that same data, and we can see that over time the average price for LCVs, light vehicles, is going up. And we can see that automatics, we could see that automatics actually have got a higher conversion rate for clicks, inquiries, than manuals. Talked earlier on about the stock issue. Here we have a fairly high interest, high click rate on a particular product, and we've got 0 sales. So you want to illustrate to the customer, here's what it should sit in terms of numbers and money. Here's what that out of stock is costing you right now. And he looks at the number next to it, he goes, that's a lot of money, I'll get it back in stock. Talked about distribution. We talked about clicking add to cart. In this case, most people buy 1 item, then 2. But over here, way over there, we've got 2 users who bought 130 items in 1 purchase, who'd actually be in second place. If we looked at just the average, and we said our average is 1.4, we'd ignore people who bought more than 30 as an anomaly. But actually, they're our biggest spenders. So average is misleading. And really, we're trying to make decisions. We're trying to work out which way to go, what's the best way to approach it. And I've shown you some ways which are complicated and some ways which are simple. I'm not saying you have to go complicated. I'm saying simple is perfectly acceptable. But each one that you're currently doing, try and think a bit more about how you'd use that data, how you'd go. And Google Analytics has got plenty of tools to help simplify that down for you. So we talked about custom segments. Custom segments, in this case, within the UI, don't need to do anything special with data model. Inquiry click used, year 2015. That's all it is. And then I can compare that against 15, 16, 14, see how we do for clicks, see how the interest goes, break it down by channel. So I can see which ones work better on which channels. Okay for time? Yeah. So we've got quite a lot more then. Compare over time. And if you get to that sort of stuff, I said earlier on about drill down within the UI to try and make yourself, use a shortcut. Again, something most people don't use. If you get to a view you want, a time period, a set of segments you want, add shortcut, you can get back there quickly and share it with the customer to show them. This one's a little bit harder in that we did different portals, we've got different audiences. So we've got Auto Trader, Parkers, etc. for the car guys. It costs us money to send car stock there. And they used to just send all their car stock, all 3,000 cars they've got across the group, all to Auto Trader, all to Parkers, at a cost per car. But Parkers don't do as well for cars of a different price. So why send our £50,000 cars to Parkers when our £20,000 cars work better there? And we were able to start selectively sending our stock to the ones which work best, save money, but also put the right stock that's got a higher conversion rate in front of them. In this case, they were sending us a referral string, so we got a lot more than that. We got price up to 30,000, but we also got postcode, make, colour, whether they wanted diesel. This allowed me to group stuff into cohorts. People who were very price sensitive, or just went 30,000 plus, or people went 25,000 to 27,500. Because they're able to be put into a segment, I can remarket to them differently. Regular expressions, I won't leave that because we've got there. Custom channel groups, as standard, decent. If you've got your tagging and your UTM parameters set up, okay. But actually, if you create custom channel groups, you can add more detail that's appropriate to you. So we're over on time, so I will put this up online as it stands. But different groups, different levels of detail. I mostly see accounts which have got 1 custom channel group in there. And I typically break paid alone into 3 or 4. So I'll have campaign, group, type, which mechanism, which creative I'm using, down to which part of the buying cycle they're in. And each of those will have a different level of detail within that I will use to look at. Cool. Okay, I'll wrap it there because 2 more slides to go and they're a bit more in depth. So.
All right, thank you very much, Tim.
Yeah.